You, just in that small period of time, dodged death 3, 4 times, though?
Probably about 7 or 8 times. Yeah, Steve. My airplane, they should have been a direct hit, and it wasn't. Should have blown up, but it didn't. That missile that went right by my head should have killed me, but it didn't. The ejection should have killed me. The opening shock should have broken my neck, but it didn't. The bullets, one of them should have hit me on the air. Once I got on the ground, should have hit me, but I was meant to be here for some reason.
Hey everybody, just a quick reminder before we get the episode going that your support means a great deal to me. If you are able to support the channel financially, please do go to 10percenttrue.com, hit subscribe and pick one of the packages. For £5, $6.50 a month, you get early access and ad-free access to my content. And for a little bit more than even that, you also get access to AMA and private Q&A sessions that are run directly with my guests through Zoom call at least once a quarter, probably more often than that. I'd appreciate your support. Anyway, let's get on with the episode. Pig, welcome to 10% True. It is a real honor to have you on the channel. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Steve. Glad to be here.
Pig, I wanted to just do a couple of sort of administrative things before we get into talking about your experiences. Anybody who is watching this rather than listening to it will see some A7s in the background, so we know, broadly speaking, what we're going to be talking about. Before we get into that, I wanted to say thank you to Sly McGill. So Sly is a mutual friend of ours, and he introduced us, and I'm very grateful to him for doing that. So Sly, I know you're listening. Thank you, mate. I really appreciate the introduction. Another thing is just to let the audience know that if you would like to support 10% True, if you'd like to help make sure that stories like Pigs are received by as wide an audience as possible, I'd really appreciate your support. You can go to 10percenttrue.com, you can hit subscribe, and through a monthly rolling contract, you can make a small financial contribution to the channel, in exchange for which you have a number of benefits. One of them is you don't have to watch any of these episodes with adverts rolling through them. The other is that you can ask guests questions through the AMA mechanism. And so we've got a couple of questions. One I'm going to ask up front for Pig that have come from the audience. Another we'll ask through the course of the interview. But the first question that I would ask is from Sedlo, and then we'll get into it, Pig, and we'll start with sort of how you got into naval aviation and what your story is. But the first question was from Sedlo. So obviously, as people will be able to see from the background, you were flying A-7s. You were flying them over North Vietnam in around about the 1972 period of time. I think that's correct. And his question was, would you be able to talk a little bit about what it was like to fly Alpha strikes into the north? What was the planning like? How was it to be part of a large formation? And did you see tactics change over time?
Well, that's a very good question. Thanks for asking that. Our skipper, who I ended up naming one of my children after, that's the kind of leader this man was, had the novel idea, instead of flying, well, the Air Force calls it a four-ship, Navy calls it a four-plane. He said, you know what, let's knock out the fourth one and do a 3-aircraft division, which is much more maneuverable, because an Alpha strike, you got over 30 airplanes in one piece of sky. And everything's great until the first SAM comes up. And then you have airplanes everywhere. And then you're going to be maneuvering, and it's so much easier to do 3 than it is 4. So he talked the Air Wing commander into developing a 3-aircraft formation for everybody. So that worked out wonderful. And we used all the Alpha strike tactics with groups of 3 airplane all at once. And I only had to fly a couple of those that I found out I'd rather be doing an Iron Hand, which are the 2 guys that go in and fight the SAMs to start with, which is how I got shot down, by the way. But my favorite was the Iron Hand mission, because there's just 2 of us out there. And part of the Alpha strike, it's the word commonly referred to as a gaggle, and it is quite that. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you have that tape, Steve. I sent you the Alpha strike, and on that, my commanding officer is leading, And I'm on his wing. He's champ one, I'm champ two. And we had to strike a SAM storage area uh, just northwest of Hanoi. And there was a whole bunch of SAMs down there. And we got real close. And he says, going to take a steep dive to get in there. And boy, it did. We rolled in, and all 20 something airplanes behind us rolled in, about a 60-degree dive. And we hit it, ignited a whole bunch of missiles. They started corkscrewing through the air. And we were able to get everybody in that mission and everybody out uh, as briefed. But again, I'd much rather be on the Iron Hand mission than right in the middle of the Alpha Strike. Hope that's good enough answer.
Thanks, Pig. Yeah, so the tape that you reference, we will. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it. You've provided it to me. There's some commentary on it, which is contemporaneous. So one of your shipmates, squadron mates, talked a little over it to explain it to his wife, and then he sent it back to the States while this was all going on. I think I might be able to trim some of that out, and then we might. I can probably put it online, and then we could come back and do another session where you, in person, go through it. So we kind of trim him out and put you into it, or we keep him, and then you can expound on what he's saying. But we'll work something out so that the audience gets to hear that. Okay, so I'd like to do a couple of things, Pig, if that's okay with you. I'd like to start with understanding how you became a naval aviator, and I've read conflicting reports. You were shot down on your 75th and 85th mission. I don't know which one it was, but I'd like to not systematically go through, but I'd like to understand what your combat experience was to the point where you were downed. And also what I'd like to do, because the audience for 10% True is pretty technical. They like nerdy stuff. They're like me. They like to get into the weeds. I think some aviators find that a bit bemusing, and they're kind of curious about why someone would be interested in these things. But I'd really like to get an expose, if you will, on the A7. There are some things, I know a little bit about it. There are some things that I would really like to understand more. And we can include then discussing the Iron Hand mission as part of that. So let's start then with you. Where do you come from? How did you end up flying jets in the Navy?
Wonderful question, Steve. 16 years old, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And the reason I did is because I went to an air show at Navy Dallas, Blue Angels. One of the solo pilots signed an autograph for me and spoke to me like I was somebody, made me feel good. And that's their job on the team. That's what they do, as well as the Thunderbirds. And so I went out there the next year, and that year he was the lead solo. And of course, I had to go get an autograph again. And I recognized him. And I didn't know he was going to be the lead solo, but it was. And so he said, I remember you, son. You were here last year, weren't you? You really want to fly jets in the Navy? And I just said, yes, sir, I do. And he said, well, I'm sure you will someday. And he signed the picture and said, I'll see you in the fleet. That man's name was Lou Chatham. And that's what lit the fire. I mean, after that, I had to do it. And I thought in college, I would go out to the same airfield and watch the F-8s do touch and goes. And they would land and go into burner, pull their nose up about 60 to 70 degrees and go do a high key and practice flame out approaches and just watch them go into burner and take off. And I said, I got to do that because I couldn't think of anything more cool to do than land a jet fighter on an aircraft carrier. And I was right in the daytime. At nighttime, whole different ballgame. Nobody wants to do it at night. But that's what lit my fire and provided a burning desire to overcome all kinds of obstacles that happened to me later on. I just took them one by one and overcame because of that.
Can you describe your journey, for want of a better description, through the training pipeline then? What did you fly first, and what were your first jet experiences?
Well, everybody flew the T-34. It was a prop plane when I went through. And I don't know, about 15 or 16 hours in that thing. And then your flight grades determine whether you could get jets or props or helicopters. And I was lucky enough to get jets. So I went to Meridian, Mississippi and flew the T-2 Buckeye. And we did that. And then once we did formation and all that kind of stuff, we went back to Pensacola with the T-2 to land on the aircraft carrier and do air-to-air gunnery. And I put a section in my book that there's a poor instructor flying a T-2 dragging a banner behind his jet with students that only had 100 hours of flight time shooting bullets at that banner. I still don't know how they decided who lost the bet on who would have to do that or not. But we did air-to-air gunnery, and we landed on the aircraft carrier back then with only about 100 hours of flight time total. And so went from the T-2, did that, landing on the Lexington. And then from Meridian, I went to Kingsville. We got brand new A-4s in Kingsville, Texas. So we finished up there in advanced training. And then again, the flight grades determined what you got. I wanted F-4s really bad. And I really wanted F-8s, but they didn't have any. I got a week ahead of my class. And that week, they had one F-4 and several A-7s and some A-6s. So I got A-7s out in Lemoore, California. The very next week, because of the war, they commissioned the Hancock and the Oriskany with 4 F-8 squadrons. So had I waited one more week, I could have got F-8s, but I didn't. And my buddies did. That's the way it went. And that's how I ended up with A-7s in Lemoore, California.
Can I ask you to just expound a little on the T2 landing on the carrier experience? One of the things that is really interesting to observe over time is obviously technical revolution and change. And I know that it doesn't feel like it was a long time ago, but actually it was a really long time ago, the 60s and the 70s. I can say that because I'm from the 70s. But one of the things you see is F-35 now has this fully autonomous landing capability. It's so accurate that they have to sort of vary the touchdown point of the hook because it's scraping the deck to pieces. F-18, I think, now has magic carpet, so it will do most of that on its own. I think before that, they programmed into it the ability to just maintain, I think, an angle of attack and then use the stick really to descend and the throttle to speed up, or the other way around. A naval aviator like you would probably laugh and say, no, you got it the wrong way around. But of course, T2, and in those days, you didn't have any of those aids, let's say. What was the experience like? How difficult was it?
The T2, again, we had about 100 hours total time when we landed on the ship the first time. Steve, it was so mechanical, it grained the procedures. Meatball, line up, angle of attack, meatball, line up, angle of attack. And it was strictly, we practiced a whole lot. And they had a small carrier deck painted on the runway, especially a little field outside of Pensacola. And we just went and did a whole bunch of landings graded by an LSO until he thought that we were ready to go to the ship. And again, it was just purely mechanical. So the day we actually went out to the ship and I rolled into the groove and I saw the ship there, I'm looking at the meatball. I'm looking at my lineup with the ship, just like I did with the field, and angle of attack, which is airspeed, obviously. And looked at those 3 things all the way down. And I hit the deck and I trapped. And it was like, wow, I really did this. This is just like at the field, except I really come into a stop. And I think we got 4. They taxied us up, shot us off the cat. We got 3 more landings, and that was it. But it was so mechanical. It wasn't until I went to the A4 and got 6 more landings till I started to get the feel that this is really not mechanical. This is skill level of how well you can define the meatball and keep the lineup properly and keep your airspeed right where it needs to be. And then the A4 obviously had nothing automatic. And then when I went to the A7, nothing automatic on either. We had an automatic throttle, but nobody ever used it because the engine lag was too great. And if you use that automatic throttle when you got just behind the ship prior to hitting the round down, we called it the burble. It's a wind effect that comes down and causes you to lose a little bit of airspeed. So if you're in auto, it'll push the throttle up too much and make you bolter, which means you don't catch any wires and you got to go around again. So that's why nobody used it. They've got it down to a science in the Hornet and the 35 now. That was it.
So we were talking before I hit record about some of the relativity of the things I might ask you about or say to you. And it is clear that you were shot down on a combat mission over North Vietnam. You did spend time as a prisoner of war. I'm not spoiling anything by saying that. But also that you overcame adversity coming back to the States after your incarceration. And nowadays you provide really invaluable support to other veterans, other people who are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm going to let you tell that story. I'm not going to tell it for you. But you have your book. I don't know if you are able to show that. Have you got your book? Where's your book?
Yeah.
We had it a minute ago.
That's right. Got it.
There it is. Hope and Courage,
that worked, right?
Which is a fantastic, that's a fantastic front cover. I kind of recognize that place. It's almost like I've been there before.
I think you have been there before, and you know where that is, right?
That's Sly's backyard, isn't it? Incredible.
Absolutely, Sly's backyard.
So
that's him out there hoisting the flag.
So when I ask you this question, Pig, I say that with those things in mind. It's a relative thing, but was it frightening? Was the prospect of doing it, the reality of then landing on the back of the boat, was that something that really made your heart pound and sweaty palms and shaky hands afterwards? What was the experience?
Oh, Steve, in the daytime, it's the most fun Disney World ride you could ever do. Guys would light, cheat, and steal just to do it in the daytime because it's just fun. And even when you're first learning in Meridian or in Pensacola and in Kingsville with a T2 and the A4, that's mostly mechanical, but it's still fun because you go, man, I did it. That's really cool. But then even when you're up to, 200, 300 carry landings, it's still just greatly fun, except for the night stuff. The night stuff is absolutely terrifying. It's the hardest thing to do in aviation is land on the ship at night. And I've got Navy buddies and Air Force buddies that landed on the ship that are astronauts, and every single one of them will tell you the heart rate is higher landing on the ship at night than it is during a re-entry in a space shuttle. And that's fact. It's just very, very scary.
Does that abate over time? Does it become, it's still scary, but it's less scary, or is it as terrifying every time?
Every time. Every single time. I don't care if you got 200 night landings. It's still scary. And the reason it is because you have no depth perception at night. You don't have that seat of the pants feeling like you do in the daytime. And you feel like you're very, very high. The optical illusion of the little dot down there, which is the meatball, and the drop lights behind the ship, that's all you see. And when there's a bright moon, everybody wants to fly at night when there's a bright moon because it's almost like daytime. But when it's really, really dark, which it is most of the time, it's just there's no depth perception, no seat of the pants. Plus, you have to fight the feeling of being high. So you want to pull off power a lot. And of course, the LSO knows that. So he's always saying a little power, a little more. And I was an LSO, so I know that. And it's just a very, very scary feeling because you can't see the ship till you're almost right there and see it. But you're still just looking at the ball when you get in close. Meatball, line up, angle of attack until you get close, right crossing the deck, and you go, meatball, meatball, meatball. That's all you look at till you hit.
Really?
But it's scary at night every time you do it.
This isn't a silly question then, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but when you came to fly combat then, and you knew you were going to be doing a night recovery, did that not weigh on your mind? It's the wrong turn of phrase, but was that on your mind? Are you thinking about that through the course of the combat mission? Are you thinking about that before you take off? Do you compartmentalize it? What is your approach?
You compartmentalize it. When you shoot off the front for a combat mission, the only thing in your mind is completing the mission, doing what you're doing. And after probably 30 combat missions, your heart rate at night, because I've seen by 30 missions, I've seen a lot of SAMs already because they saved them up. And when we went over there early, we were ordered to by President Nixon. They shot everything but the kitchen sink at us. So by 30 missions, I'd seen a lot of the missiles and dodged them a lot at night, which is a whole different ballgame, by the way. And so you just do it. And you don't even think about landing on the ship till after you've dropped your bombs or done what we did at night and come back and get feet wet and start heading back to the ship. That's when you start thinking about landing on the ship at night again. And believe it or not, uh, uh, there's a couple of exceptions to it on really hairy missions that you get real close to getting shot down. By what I mean by that, AAA balls going right by your head, and it gets real close. But your heart rate is actually higher landing on the ship at night than it is dodging missiles at night. It's hard to believe, but it is.
Can we talk a little bit about the A-7 and then we'll get into combat and your experiences thereafter? One of the things that I always feel sorry for the A-7 for being called is SLUF, and we can swear on this channel, so that's I think that's slow ugly fucker. I think that's the correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you got it.
So SLUF, but I always thought it was a good looking aeroplane, to be frank. But obviously you missed out on the F8, and I guess you missed out on F4 as well. And you didn't go to combat in the A4. What did you think about it? Were you happy to be assigned to it? What were your impressions of the airplane?
Well, at first, I wanted the F4 so bad and the F8 so bad. I said, oh, well, I'll just take it. But it was a single seat jet, which is what I wanted. I wanted a single seat. I would have done the F4, even though there's two seats. But the beauty of it is it took a whole lot of combat damage. And I got shot a lot before the mission. I got shot down. And it would take bullets. It will take pieces of AAA fragments real well. And we would actually get holes in the tail or the UHT or the rudder. And we'd come back and they just put speed tape over it. And we'd go out and fly missions again. That's why people call it duct tape. We call it speed tape because you can go 500 knots and that stuff's still on there. But it took a lot of damage, a whole lot of damage, because I lost several hydraulic systems several times and came back. And the one I'll tell you about later if you want, where I lost all the oil out of my engine. And I was 30 miles inside of North Vietnam. A piece of a AAA fragment hit a bearing in the engine, and I had no oil and no oil pressure. And I was just hoping the engine would run to get me out over the beach so I could eject. And it made it. I dropped the bombs. It made it out over the beach, and I was 100 miles from the Medway. And I'm thinking, there's no way this motor's going to run 100 miles with no oil in it. Well, it did. And I couldn't move the throttle. I had to just vary my speed with a speed brake until I got close to the ship. And I put the gear down, started milking the flaps down, and they had to rig the barricade. Reason being because we have no go-around capability since you can't move the throttle, so they have to rig the barricade. And the Air Wing LSO was waving me. I'll never forget it. He goes, "Pig, we got the barricade rigged, so don't forget to take a cut when you touch down." That's all he said the whole time. And what he meant was when we normally touch down, we go to full power to go around. Well, obviously you can't do that. So I just pulled the power back. And I didn't have to because the instant my gear hit the flight deck, the engine seized, it quit. And I rolled right in the barricade and I got an okay barricade pass. One of the best passes I ever flew, and I couldn't even touch the throttle. But it tore the airplane up pretty good because I had probably enough excess speed. I didn't have to worry about slowing down. And it tore a lot of stuff. So they pulled all the good stuff out and pushed the airplane over the side. And because that was the first one, and of course, again, I lost one when I got shot down on the combat mission. But back then, those aircraft were $3 million a piece. So how cheap they were back then. So I went through three of them. So they called me when I got back, called me the $6 million man. There were several guys in my squadron, Steve, that got shot down and rescued and went through two airplanes as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the airplane's performance in terms of, was it fast? Could you? I'm really interested in learning about your experience. You said by the 30 missions you've been shot at a lot. I don't know if you said it just on this call or if we talked about it before. You said you experienced it dodging SAMs at night. Can you talk about the entire spectrum of being shot at and defending against it?
Yeah, at night. The good thing is they're really easy to see because you got that big rocket motor lighting off, and you just kind of watch it and do basically the same thing you do in the daytime to see if it's headed for you or not. You push the nose over, and if it's going somewhere else, it'll go somewhere else. But if it's headed for you, it'll go up and start coming back down and heading right at you. But you can still see the flames. So that way it's headed for you. And from experience in the daytime, the timing and basically the maneuvering involved. In the daytime, you wait till the SAM gets to be about 3/4 of a mile from you, and you do a high G roll into it. And of course, we're doing 400, 450, 500. It's doing Mach 4. So when you do the roll, it tries to make that turn and it can't. So the proximity fuse blows up. And so we do the roll around it. All you do is look up and watch it blow up. And you go, okay, that's cool. And then you just stuff the stick forward and get some more airspeed. You unload the plane, get some speed. And at night, it's pretty much the same, except the first time you see one at night, you roll way early because you think it's a lot closer than it is. And you might tend to get some frags out of that deal, but just experience. You learn how to do it. The best part is it's real easy to see.
You talked about waiting until it's 3/4 of a mile away or so. How do you know that for the first time? How do you know that little thing that's doing Mark 4 is 3/4 away, 3/4 of a mile away for the first time you do it?
Well, for me, I learned that from dogfighting other guys because the ideal missile range when you're coming in behind a guy is about a mile, about 30 to 40 degrees off, about a mile away. So you know what a jet looks like from about a mile. And obviously the missile, it's about the size of a telephone pole. So it's a little bit longer than the jet, obviously, but a little bit skinnier. But it's easy to judge. It really is. Except for the first time you see one in the daytime, you think 3/4 of a mile. It's probably closer to a mile and a half when you do your roll because you think it's closer than it really is. So it's actually going to be able to make a little more turn than it would normally. So, but it's just experience, and that's how I did it.
What was the closest that one had got to you then prior to you being down?
Oh, probably 6 feet. And I think this is in the book. This is a story. KT Sanger and I went out my first Iron Hand mission downtown Hanoi, and this was like the third or fourth mission I ever flew. I'm flying Ken's wing. He'd already had 400 combat missions. He was an incredibly experienced aviator, and he told me to stay on his wing, and that's exactly what I did. And we had Shrike missiles, and we were in a dive on a radar site, and we had the missile warning system that you can hear you heard it on the tape when the missile's in the air coming at you. Right before we fired the Shrike, a SAM missile came right between us. I mean, I'm probably 10 feet away from his airplane, and that missile came right between us doing Mach 4. As a matter of fact, he keyed the mic and he goes, "Hey, did you see that?" and then we both fired Shrikes on that site that was guiding that missile. And just by the luck of whatever, the fuse didn't work and it didn't blow up, or it got both of us. That's the closest one I saw, except for the day I got shot down. I'll tell you about that one later.
It's a bit nerdy. Maybe we should talk about the Iron Hand mission generally, but it's a little bit nerdy. But wasn't one of the jamming techniques to jam the fusing or jam the command? Was it command fuse, the SA-2? I can't remember if a radar pointing at you said to the missile, "Okay, you're close enough now. You should fuse." But it wasn't. I don't know if that data link was fused. It was jammed, or the fuse was jammed. But was that one of the capabilities you had on the airplane?
Well, we had a capability of a piece of electronic gear that we had would put out imaginary radar blips behind the jet. And that's the day I got shot down. That's pretty much what saved me from getting a direct hit, was the missile guided on one of those radar blips caused by the machine that I had in the jet. And it's an ALQ, the number. I think the number might be confidential, but the ALQ is not. But that's what did it. And we had another ALQ piece of gear that you would hear the sound of the radar guiding the SAM, and the SAM would lock onto you. We called it a high warble, a deedle 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 type thing. And that was another ALQ piece of gear that did that for us.
What then was the role of Iron Hand? And I've interviewed a bunch of guys. I sent them to you, the Weasel guys. And you said, hey, the Navy did Iron Hand. So tell us about Iron Hand. Tell us what the mission was. When did you get involved in it? What did it consist of?
Well, the reason I liked it, because my first mission with Ken, even though that missile went right by our jet, the mission was, there were four of us, two on the, let's say that the Alpha Strike was going in east to west. Well, two of us would go down on the south side. Two of us would go in on the north side. We would go ahead of the strike group. We'd be the first four jets in country, and hoping they would fire missiles at us, which they usually did. When they did, we would fire the Shrike missiles back at the radar site. And they would do, our Shrike missiles would home in on their radar signal. And they knew that. So as soon as they saw the Shrikes launched at a certain period of time, they turned the radar off. Because if they didn't, our Shrike would guide in and blow them up. So our job was to take the missiles for the strike group so they wouldn't shoot the missiles at the strike group. And our real job was just to shoot Shrikes so they would not use their radar to target one of the airplane in the strike groups. So we sit there and we called it dueling with SAM sites, because that's about what it was like. And we did that while the strike group got in, dropped their bombs, got out. And it wasn't until the strike group leader called feet wet, which means they were all out over the water. Then and only then would we head for the beach. And sometimes we would take a lot of shots on the way out, which we did on the day I got shot down. But we stayed in country until all the strike group guys were gone, and then we would head out. And we were the last four airplanes over the beach.
One of the things, Pig, that I recall from the Weasel interviews I did, and I'm not asking to draw comparisons between you and them. That's not what this is, but it's informing the questions I ask you. But one of the things that I think those guys said was that they had something like 350 prepared sites for the SA-2, and then they would just overnight move the actual missiles and radars between those sites. What was your experience of finding them? Were you always required to just wait till they launched and then you follow the plume of smoke to the site?
That's pretty much exactly what we did. Yeah, real high tech, but it was just kind of the way we did it. We didn't want to obviously launch our Shrike missiles until they had launched a missile and we knew it was radar guided. So they had us locked up once we figured out it was headed for us. And once we figured that out, that's when we could center needles and fly the jet to the proper trajectory that we wanted to make sure the missile could blow up the radar site. So we pretty much waited till they shot at us before we shot at them. Every once in a while, we would launch a preemptive Shrike missile. Just launch it ahead of the group, just to see if we would, because once we got over the beach, you could hear their search radar. It would make a noise, so you knew they were looking at you. But once they locked on, it'd make another noise, and when we did that, we'd launch a strike prior to them launching a SAM. And sometimes that would prevent them from actually launching a missile because they didn't want that preemptive strike to go right down their throat. So that happened frequently. We would do that.
Can I ask you a couple of nerdy questions? It might be a bit of a stretch. I don't. You might not remember the details, but you just described centering the needles. How did you get into position? What was the? I mean, I know from and talking to the Weasel guys, there was a cone, 15-degree cone or something like that, and you'd fly to get. How so? So how did you do that in the A-7?
The A-7 had the Shrike delivery system was similar to flying an ILS approach, like we did, the old guys did. You know, everybody's got a heads-up display now. Even the E-model A-7 does. And you just follow the flight path marker to the dot. But in the A4, all the old jets, they had a crosshair symbol on the gyro. And that symbol would guide you left or right, up and down. And once you centered them in a certain angle of a dive, that means you were right down the cone that Shrike missile needed to hit that radar site. So we would just center the needles. And once they were, that was the ideal spot to be to launch the missile.
So the aeroplane was sensing the radio, the RF energy from the site, and the aeroplane was guiding you into that. Okay, that's really interesting. And did you have a range indication? Did you know? So you've got an azimuth and elevation. Do you know when you can shoot?
Oh no, we would shoot when they shot the missile.
Okay.
And aside from the preemptive, we just shoot preemptives. Just wag it. We had no idea how far away they were, but we shoot them up. So, what goes up must come down, and they knew that. So, they were afraid to turn the radar on sometimes because they knew that thing would come down and hone in on them. But basically we would just wait till they fired a missile, and we could see it when it lifted off because of the booster. You could see that obviously. And when we did, we'd just go into a dive. And most of the time, once we did that, if it was close enough, we were pretty much on dead center for the Shrike. So we just fired back. Dueling with a SAM site.
How long would the Shrike, a preemptive Shrike, how long would that stay airborne for them? What sort of vol period did that provide cover for?
Well, it depends on how high they shot it, but probably a couple of minutes.
Really?
Easy, yeah. And sometimes, you know, they knew that too. So if it was shot really high, they would take longer, obviously. But they would pretty much wait until those preemptive Shrikes were already hitting the ground before they would hit the radar guidance system on.
You've already described, I guess in some respects, then some of the tactics you were using. And again, I'm curious to understand the differences between the Air Force Wild Weasel mission and your Iron Hand mission. They started with F-100s and they ended up with F-105Fs, I think, two-seaters. They had a Bear, an EWO in the back. What did that give them that you didn't have, or perhaps to put the question a different way, when you were flying that mission, were you thinking it'd be handy to have somebody in the back seat looking at the radar emissions and helping to coordinate what's going on?
No, I never really thought that, Steve. Reason is because once we got to a certain area, you could see the missile come off, and all we did was turn straight into the missile and line up the needles. Okay. And it was really pretty simple for us. I'm not sure if the Air Force did it from a greater range away from them or not, because I don't know how their tactics were, but we ended up being pretty close all the time. So it was pretty easy to spot and shoot.
It's interesting that one of the things that, so Star Baby is somebody who's been on the channel a lot. He's an EWO, a Wild Weasel, very erudite, and I know he's gone back and done a load of historical analysis as well. And I'm no question that he'll be listening to this for sure. One of the things that he talks about is the difficulty in validating the success, if you will, of the weasel mission. And really, sometimes it just comes down to, did somebody not get shot down while the weasels were airborne? And so, am I correct then in assuming that for you, battle damage assessment was far easier if you were that close to the site? Would you witness the missile impact the radar? Would you always come away knowing that you had actually destroyed it, as opposed to just forced it off air?
I think only once in all the missions I flew, I saw that thing hit a site. Most of the time, after you fire the missile, you want to start jinking as fast as possible to keep any other site that's got you locked up from being able to shoot you down. So generally, once we fired the missiles, we started pulling G's immediately, not even looking at it. So what you mentioned initially about the only BDA was, hey, did anybody get shot at or hit or not? And if you didn't get hit, then we did our job. So.
Yeah. How many missions did you fly? How many Iron Hands, not Iron Mans? How many Iron Hands did you do?
I'd say probably 40.
Yeah. Did your tactics change?
The majority. Yeah.
So over that period of time, did your tactics change? Then I'm wondering whether or not you did any sort of baiting type stuff where somebody might fly in and feint something or another to get someone to come on air, and then someone comes in and shoots them. Was there anything fancy going on?
On the Iron Hand stuff, no, because we were Iron Hand, but we also RESCAP. So I'll give you an example. One of my good friends that went through officer training and flight training together, he was in our sister squadron, VA 93, and Mike got hit, made it out over the water and ejected, and landed in the water. Well, I think it was Ray and I. We were on an Iron Hand mission, and we heard this happen on guard with Mike getting shot down. So we headed. He was right off the coast of Haiphong, so we headed out there, and since we were Iron Hand / RESCAP, that means we not only had Shrikes, but we had these Buckeye missiles, which had a bunch of bomblets in them, and we had AIM-9s and we had guns. So as soon as Mike was out there, he was only like a half mile off the beach in the water. Well, there was a shore battery that was shooting at him. So we went down low level and started pounding the shore battery to keep them from hitting Mike. Meanwhile, they launched a helicopter from one of the destroyers out there to come pick him up. Well, we did this racetrack. We dropped Buckeyes. We shot whatever Shrikes we had left. We shot AIM-9s. We shot guns. We did whatever we could do until that helo got out there, and he picked up Mike and took him back to the Midway.
Mm.
And on that mission, we ran out of gas. So they were supposed to launch an A-6 tanker, but the tanker went down, and there ended up being an Air Force 135 with a basket that pretty much saved our butts. He said, "Hey, champs, 1 o'clock high," and we plugged in, so we got back to the Midway. Kept us from jumping out.
What did all of this do to you in terms of your mindset around you potentially being shot down? Did it? Does it change the way you approach things? Does it make you reassess whether or not your academic understanding of survival and escape and resistance and evasion is strong? What is happening in your mind as you're going through these 50, 60, 70 combat missions?
That's an excellent question, Steve. When I went over originally, I went over there. I knew I was going, and I just said simply, "Look, that's my job. That's what I'm trained to do. I'll just do the mission." I felt the exact same until my roommate and my best friend got killed. And when Gary got killed, he was my best friend, just dear friend on earth. When that happened, I started taking everything personally. And then 2 more guys in my squadron got killed, and that got worse. So what I mean by taking it personally is that I really didn't care if I got shot down or not. I was so concentrated on the target because I wanted to get back at them for getting my buddies. And pretty much, excuse me, pretty much all the guys that were over there, especially for their second and third times, they felt the same way. And that's just the way it is. And truthfully, I probably, the day I got shot down, I probably pressed the target too long because of that, because I wanted to get them so bad that the fear just goes away. It really does. You just want to get back so bad that it really doesn't matter.
Can we talk about your shoot down then? Can you set the scene for it and explain what happened?
You bet. I was on the Iron Hand mission. We got in and shot some Shrikes, and they shot some missiles, and Strike group got in, got out, and they called feet wet. And Ray and I turned around, headed for the beach. And just as we did, we got that launch alert, and they launched 3 more missiles at us. When they launch Shrikes, you have to dogfight those, Steve, just like another airplane. And like I mentioned before, we turned around to acquire them visually. That's the most important part. And when we did, and you push your nose over and you see it coming down, it's got your name on it, and you wait till it's about 3/4 of a mile and you roll around it. Well, I did, and that was one. And then I unloaded the jet to get more speed. Well, while we were doing that, unbeknownst to us, they'd launched more missiles from behind us. And obviously we didn't see them. We were looking at the ones in front of us. So shortly after I had unloaded my jet for airspeed, one came and hit me right behind the tail. And because of the ALQ saved a direct hit, but it was close enough to knock the engine out immediately, and everything behind my head was a big fireball. When that happened, I knew what had happened. I turned toward the beach to the left, and I was hoping I could glide to the beach. I was about 8,000 feet when I got hit. And out of the corner of my eye, I looked to the right, and here was another missile coming at me. So instinctively, I just took the stick, trying to turn back to the right into the missile, but the hydraulic system was gone. The stick was frozen. I couldn't move it. And the missile started coming at me, and all these weird things going through my mind. Hey, should I eject? And then I went, no, if I do that, it'll guide on my seat. Just all these dumb things coming through my mind in a millisecond. The next thing I know, this guy goes right by my head about 10 feet, and the fuse didn't work, or I'd have been dead. And anyway, the airplane continued to roll over into a dive, uncontrollable. I had both feet up on the console with a stick and trying to pull the stick to pull it up, obviously to no avail. And I probably did it way too long because my airspeed got to close to 500, probably over that. But I saw way over 450 before I started reaching for the ejection curtain. And I'm up basically upside down, floating in the seat, doing about 500 knots. And I reached up and pulled the curtain, and it didn't work. And I'm going, I thought I was dead then. And then I really pulled it. And of course the seat fired. Well, when the seat fired, because I'm inverted, kind of floating in the seat a little bit, that rocket motor just, popped me in the back pretty much. The most violent experience I've ever been through in my life. Just, I had no idea if I was upside down, right side up. It felt like running full speed into a brick wall with a tornado throwing you around before the brick wall. And next thing I know, I'm in the parachute, and I can't believe that I was still alive, because it should have broken my neck. It should have broken my back. It cracked my vertebrae. It did tear my left leg up, my right arm quite a bit, but I was still alive. And for about 3 seconds, I was going, wow, I can't believe I'm still made it. And it was really nice and quiet. And then the bullets started ripping through the parachute. There were thousands of them on the ground, and they were all shooting at me. And I'm going, oh boy, I'm never gonna survive this, because just the numbers of bullets. Next thing you know, I'm on the ground, thankfully, and I landed in about a foot of water with some tall grass. And then the next thing you know, the bullets were hitting all around me where the parachute was. So I had to pop the chute and crawled away from the parachute as fast as I could. And the bullets were still hitting right where the parachute was. Once I crawled about, I don't know, 30 or 40 feet away, I pulled out my first thing I did was I grabbed a bottle of, had a baby bottle full of water in the pocket of my G suit. And I had that because talking to all the guys that have ejected, they said the first thing that happens because you're in shock is you're dying of thirst. So most of us carried little plastic baby bottles full of water. And I'm glad I did because I downed it in about a half a second. And then I pulled out my radio and talked to Ray, the guy I was flying with. And I said, Ray, I just want you to know I'm on the ground. I'm alive. There's a jillion of them down here. I'll see you. And right after I said that, they came up from behind, hit me in the back of the head with a rifle, and I got captured. They waited till all the aircraft were gone. Then they set me down, took my bootlaces out, and tied my arms behind my back. Of course, they were stealing my watch, my gun, and all that kind of stuff. About 10 feet away, there was one of the villagers, which there were about a dozen of them, with a piece of metal in his hand. And he had this weird look. Fortunately, I caught his face. Had this weird look like, I want you to die. And he started running at me, yelling. And he raised this piece of metal up. And when he got close to me, I lunged to the left. Well, on your screen, it looks like I'm lunging to the right, but I lunged to the left, and he came down and cut my neck open back here, but he missed the big vein. And the thing that saved my life was amongst all those people that were there was one North Vietnamese Army regular soldier in uniform. And after that guy did that, the Army guy actually picked him up, set him down, and shook his finger like, no, you can't do that. And the reason he did was because we were worth so much politically to their government. They had orders to keep us alive. And had that guy not been there, I wouldn't be here, because all the villagers care about is taking care of you. And they put me after that. I was on the back of a couple of water buffaloes and a couple of boats and a couple of trucks. And next thing I knew, I was at this old prison camp in Haiphong. I couldn't walk. It didn't hurt that bad because I was still in shock. But they took me and set me in a room, pulled my flight suit off, and gave me these fancy striped pajamas to wear, and ushered me into a room where all these cameras were going off. I can't remember if I sent that picture to you or not, see, with me in the fancy striped pajamas. I'll send it to you. That was taken about 2 hours after I got shot down. DOD sent it to me years later. Just wanted to know if that was me. And I went, yep, that's me. And it was taken in there where all those flash bulbs were going off. And they were trying to get me to do a news conference and all that crap. And at that point, I didn't care if they killed me or not. I really didn't. And of course, my answer was pretty much no, with some stuff thrown in there. And they waited. That was about 9:30 in the morning. And then they waited till dark, threw me in the back of a truck and drove me to Hanoi, and right through the doors of the Hanoi Hilton. And that's where I stayed the rest of the time.
Wow. So you, just in that small period of time, dodged death 3-4 times, though?
Probably about 7 or 8 times. Yeah, Steve. My airplane, they should have been a direct hit, and it wasn't. It should have blown up, but it didn't. That missile that went right by my head should have killed me, but it didn't. The ejection should have killed me. The opening shock should have broken my neck, but it didn't. The bullets, one of them should have hit me on the air. Once I got on the ground, should have hit me, but I was meant to be here for some reason.
Can you, I'm really interested to hear you say that when you were taken to the press conference, you were not compliant. And again, I'm sorry if I'm asking silly questions, but no, I want to know. But are you frightened at this point? I mean, so one of the things that is a characteristic of most people, I mean, not just type A fighter pilots, but most people, is they want control. And you've gone from being in control of your airplane, being in control of your destiny, to now having zero control. Are realizations coming to you that this is the case? Are you, are you thinking through what you're going through? Do you take it a minute at a time? How are you getting through this initial period of the ordeal?
Another great question. Two reasons, two things. Our training in SEER school, and it was pretty serious training. They told us there's going to be phases that we go through: the capture phase, the interrogation phase, and then indoctrination phase. The capture phase, again, they had orders to keep us alive. That's if we're up in North Vietnam. Now down in South, in Laos, Cambodia, everything's off the table down there. But if you're in North Vietnam, they had orders to keep us alive. So that's in the back of my mind. And I pretty much saw it in action when the guy grabbed the villager. That was one thing. So, that created a bit of hope. As minor as it was, but there was a bit of hope just in that regard. And then once I got there, even the show I told you with the flash bulbs going off, I'm in shock. You're in shock for quite a while. And you're just kind of in a daze. And there wasn't really any fear. I didn't even think about fear. I just think about, well, I survived all that, and I survived that, and they haven't killed me yet. So hopefully I'll enter this interrogation phase and we'll go from there. And it was just kind of roll with the punches, see what happens next, because you don't have control.
Before we talk about that interrogation phase, Pig, can I ask you a little bit about your understanding then of what's going on at the Hanoi Hilton? Did you guys in the ready room get briefings as to the fact this place existed? There was the TAP code that's been documented and is not classified and well known about, and maybe there's some other methods that you don't talk about, whatever. But were you familiar with that? Had you learned it? And were you then in some senses going into this environment with a little bit of preparedness because you're familiar with what's happening there and there's a rank structure in place and so on?
SEER school, Steve taught us all that stuff. They taught us the TAP code. They taught us the different the timing of the capture phase, how it will go down if you're in North Vietnam. And the couple of days of ground school, we learned that. And then we had 3 days of putting you out, getting captured and getting beat on and putting in boxes and all the stuff you probably heard about and saw on TV and movies. It's all real, man. And we lose guys because of that. And the good thing is, at least it pretty much sucked, but at least we knew in 3 days it's over. Whereas in the real world, you never know when it's going to be over. And that's the worst part, by the way. And there's a great story I'll tell you later about the TAP code. You'll get a kick out of that. But yeah, they taught us all that, and they did a great job at it.
Yeah, I have a friend who told me that in history training, they put him in an oil drum and buried it. Yeah, not for me. Anyway, so when you get to Hanoi, do you know that's where you are? Are you aware enough of your surroundings? Has the pain started to kick in yet? Is the shock wearing off? What's the experience like at the point you arrive?
Yeah, I got there that night, and the pain started. Actually started on the truck ride, because it was a pretty bouncy truck ride all the way to Hanoi. And of course, I was blindfolded. I couldn't see anything. But then when they finally took me to an area where they took the blindfold off, and they put my arms behind my back, attached a rope to it, threw a rope over an overhead beam, and started raising my arms up behind me, telling me they were going to break my shoulders. And I knew from briefing that, well, let me go back a little bit. In 1970, Hanoi released 9 of our POWs. It was a supposedly show of goodwill. And all but one had authority to come home. We weren't supposed to come home unless the guys in front of us did. We were only going to come home in the order that we got there. One of the guys had orders from the senior ranking officer inside the Hilton to go home. And the reason he did, his name was Doug Hegdahl. He was an enlisted Navy kid that fell off a boat and washed up on the shore in Haiphong, and they sent him and put him in the Hilton. Doug had memorized all the names of all the POWs. And to get that back to DOD, he had orders to go. Well, these other 8 guys that went with him should have been court-martialed, but they weren't. President Nixon didn't want to do that. But they got back and they told all the stories of all the torture and everything. Well, of course, that made the North Vietnamese look pretty bad. As a result of that, when all of us started getting captured, we called us the FNGs, the friendly new guys. When we started getting captured, they beat us up quite a bit and tied us up, but they didn't break our arms and legs like they did the other guys. And we were forever grateful for that. And so I kind of knew that, yeah, they're probably not going to break my arms, even though they say they are. So I'll just say, oh, well, and go with it. And of course they didn't. And we got tied up a lot, and which being tied up with ropes for a long amount of time is uncomfortable. But boy, when they take them off, that blood starts running through. It's like not somebody sticking knives in your arms and legs. That's the part that really sucked. But fortunately, that's all we had to endure. Other than about the first week or 10 days, I was in room 18 by myself, and that's where they did all the so-called interrogation, and they'd stick a gun in your mouth and in your ear and all that kind of stuff. And I was hurt pretty bad. I had gotten malaria. About the 3rd day, I woke up and every inch of my body was covered in mosquito bites, and I got really sick. And this cut on my neck got infected, and my leg was broken. My arm didn't work well, and being hurt and sick and depressed, I'll never forget it. You know, the guy would stick a gun in my mouth. I really didn't care if he killed me or not. I was that far gone. And but all that lasted for about 3.5 weeks. And then they finally put me into Heartbreak Hotel. I can't remember if this is what you want me to talk about because I've already forgot where I started on this. They put me into Heartbreak Hotel, Steve, and that was a dungeon-like room, part of the Hilton, but we just affectionately called it Heartbreak Hotel because you walked in and there was we called it the bathroom shower room on the left side. There were 4 rooms on each side, and they walked me all the way down to the end. I was in the last room on the left. That was room 5 of Heartbreak. And it was a room 7 by 7 with 2 24-inch concrete slabs on each side. And that was your bed. And they had leg irons on the end of them in case they wanted to use those. And then there was a door with about a 10-inch opening, 10-inch square opening with bars on it. Well, I'm in there, and that's when the indoctrination phase started, because they would pull you out of Heartbreak into a room where these 2 or 3 people are at a table, offering you tea and basically what we did, whatever they gave us to eat or drink, we did it. And they thought by doing that, they were going to be nice guys. We knew better. But later on, that was in the morning, and 2 hours a day, I hear this voice, American voice, whisper, "Hey, new guy, stand up in the window." Well, it was this Air Force captain straight across from me. And you could put each foot on one of those 24-inch slabs, stand on those, and get your face up to where that little window was on the door. And I looked over there and I saw him. He said, "What's your name?" And I told him, and he said, "I'm Air Force Captain Kevin Cheney. I don't know where in the hell we are, but to the end down there on room 1 is Gordy Page." And I went, "Gordy Page? No shit." Well, Gordy was an RF-8 pilot that had gotten, we thought, killed about 3 weeks before I got shot down. He was on a photo mission flying an RF-8, and the F-4 that was chasing him saw Gordy's F-8 just blow up. Never saw a parachute. He just saw the F-8 blow up. So we thought Gordy was dead. Well, what had happened after I got a chance to talk to Gordy later, the airplane did blow up and it ejected him automatically. Just somehow by miracle, his seat worked and negative G'd him a lot. And, but he lived through it. And he was basically, other than his eyes bright red where the white is, stayed that way for a few months. He made it through okay. And then right after I said, "God, Gordy, we all thought you were dead." And then I went, "Uh-oh, I should have said that." He probably didn't take that real well, which he gave me a lot of crap the rest of the time for it. But Gordy was there, and there was another Air Force backseater in the room right next to mine. So there were 4 of us there at that time. And I couldn't eat. I was real depressed. I was sick. And the food was this pumpkin soup swill with a piece of pig fat in it. And I just couldn't eat anything. And they give us bread, little real rows of French bread, and kind of had to use that as toilet paper. I hate to get so graphic, but that's pretty much. We had a little bucket in there, and that was the bathroom. And I just couldn't eat anything. I was too far gone. Finally, one day I kept pushing the food out, and Kevin jumps up after the guard left. He goes, "Damn it, Mike, I'm starving over here, and I'm watching you push food out. You better eat that crap or you're going to die, you dummy." And just something, the way he said it, and the way I remembered my 35-year Army career granddaddy told me 2 things before I went to combat. He said, "Got 2 things to tell you, Mike. Take care of your men and don't ever give up." And my granddad's words hit me at that point. And the way Kevin said, I said, "Damn, if I don't start eating this crap, I really am going to die, because you can last about a month without food. That's about it." And I was damn near there. So I started gagging that stuff down and finally started eating. Well, then they moved Kevin and Gordy and this other guy, Tom Shingaki. They moved all 3 of those guys out. And then they moved another Air Force guy in, Brian Ratzlaff. He was in a room right next to me. I could whisper to him, but I couldn't see his face. And then, we played the game there. And then about 2 days later, on the wall right by my left ear, I hear this tap, 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 tap. And it was the tap code. Well, before Kevin had, the first thing he asked me the first day, he said, "Hey, Mike, do you remember that tap code they taught us in SEER school? Because I forgot." I said, "Yeah, I do." So I taught it to him. So he's tapping to me. He's in this big room right on the other side of where I was. It's a huge room. He's in there with 6 guys. And so he started tapping to me, and we did that for about a week. And that's where I learned I'm in the Hanoi Hilton. I learned the whole chain of command. I learned all the rules. We called them plums, and exactly what to do and what not to do. And he told me the names of all the guys and everybody else. And we were just tapping away like crazy. And then one day he goes, "Well, I got bad." He's typing all this, He goes, "Mike, you dumbass, you taught me this code backwards. Now we got to relearn this all over again." The tap code was a matrix. AFLQV across the top, ABCDE down the bottom. Well, I taught it to him backwards. So we had to relearn that. And we only did it for about 2 days. And then they moved me out of Heartbreak into that room with Kevin and Gordy and those other guys. And I tell you, Steve, moving in that room with those other guys, it was like the war was over. I can't tell you the emotions that once you're not stuck in a room by yourself and you're actually in a room with other Americans, that is everything. Especially when you found out, yeah, they know I'm alive, and then I found out a communication system we had that other people were going to know I was alive pretty soon. And that's when the room of 6 grew to a room of 37 over the next few months.
This time scale, then, I think, were you incarcerated for 9 months, a year?
8 months.
8 months. Okay.
Yes.
So this is towards the end of the war. Then,
Mm-hmm.
do you think? Well, what are your thoughts then on why you guys were grouped together? Because they presumably know the value of keeping people in solitary confinement. They know that you'll get succor and comfort from being amongst your colleagues and your mates. Why do you think they did that?
Well, they keep you in solitary for the interrogation phase and the indoctrination phase to see if they can influence you politically. Get you to write anti-war statements and make videos and all that junk. And then when they finally figure out, no, this guy, it ain't going to work with this guy, that's when they put you in the room with the other guys. And the reason they do that is because they had to do it that's the only room they had to put us. Because the solitary rooms, the new guys that got shot down after me, they had to go to the solitary room. So they had to have a room after they finished with us or figured out what we're going to do, what we're not going to do. They'd put us in the big rooms, and there were several big rooms that we were in around there with a bunch of guys in them.
At this point, how much news comes then into the prison? You've referenced some illicit method of getting information out. Are you able to get information in as well? Do you know that talks are, towards the end of your incarceration? You don't know it's the end, but towards that time, are you getting word that there's talks? That are they treating you differently? Do you get some sense of a light at the end of the tunnel?
Another excellent question, Steve. The answer is yes. Only we got no incoming information. We had to judge everything by the way we were treated. And it stayed the same until October of 72. And then they would let us out during the day for an hour or so just to walk around. But they had these fences built, so we couldn't mingle with anybody else except just those of us in the room. Well, in October, they tore all these fences down. And at that time, we got to see and talk to all the guys that had spent years over there. Ev Alvarez, the first guy there, and all these other guys. And we got to talk to them, except for the senior guys that were down on one end. They never let us see those guys face to face, and they kept them separate for us. And that was Admiral Stockdale, John McCain, General Flynn, Robbie Reisner, all those heavy duty guys. They kept them separate from us. But it was kind of funny. The very first thing when we called them the FOGs, the friendly old guys, when the FOGs saw the new guys, the thing that dazzled them the most was that we had long sideburns. And they just could not believe the military would let us grow long sideburns. And they were honest to God, they were like little kids, just desperate for news, because we tried to bring them up on the last 6 to 9 years of their life, which they had no idea what was going on. So most of the time we spent with them was to give them as much information as we could think of to get them current. And then they let us do that for a while. Then about right at the end of November, right around Thanksgiving, that all stopped. They wouldn't let us out anymore. And believe it or not, they started running air raid drills. And we go, that's weird. And prior to that, they would still do airstrikes. The Navy would send in and the Air Force would send in guys. And as a matter of fact, we were standing up in the window watching this F-4 come down really, really low and really, really fast. It ended up being one of the F-4s from the Midway. And he pulled out about 50 feet over the Hilton right there, just going warp 9. And we're sitting here watching this. Next thing, a giant blast actually blows us out of the window. And stuff started coming in over our head, metal fragments, all the way across the room and embedded itself in the wall. Well, we dug all that stuff out, and the F-4 was dodging a missile. And it was a SAM that was chasing him. That SAM impacted, that was the explosion. And the fragments from it embedded itself in the wall over there. And we dug it out, and we could see this metal with Russian writing on it. So we finally figured out that's what that was. So we didn't get up in the window anymore after that.
Wow.
Because that could have gotten us right there. But they started doing these air raid drills. And we're going, what the hell do they know and how do they know this? Because we had no idea what was going on. And then the night of December 18th, it felt like every A6 and F-111 in our inventory came right over the Hilton and started dropping bombs on Hanoi. And it was all low-level stuff for a while. And then after that, the continuous noise and percussion of 500-pound bombs just kept going nonstop. Obviously, that was the B-52s dropping bombs. And then the next thing we saw is the terrible sight of the B-52s getting shot out of the sky. Big orange fireballs, just coming to the ground as they hit them. And we're thrilled. We're happy as we can be, not for the loss of the air crewmen, but we knew that once we started this bombing, they weren't going to be able to take it, especially B-52s, which all of us felt they should have done that years ago, but before that, but they did. And we're all just happy as we can be. And one of the funny things that happened, Steve, is this is in the middle of the night. They're still dropping bombs all night long. This part of the ceiling in the Hilton in that room was falling in due to the percussion. They knew where we were, and we knew they knew where we were. But we're walking around and we're all laughing our butts off. And the reason we're laughing is that we're all shaking uncontrollably. And we couldn't stop. We couldn't stop shaking because that old inner brain in there thinks we're going to die. And we're laughing because we try to stop shaking and we couldn't. It's one of those uncontrollable subconscious reactions, and finally, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning, the bombing finally stopped for that night. And then the next night, here it comes again, all night long, B-52s and everybody else. So, we're thrilled. We know that, and this was on December 18th, and that happened all the way through Christmas. And we knew once that bombing stopped, some kind of peace agreement had to be reached, but we didn't know yet. And it wasn't until they started moving us around inside the Hilton. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Return with Honor. Did you ever see that? I'll tell you about it later. Anyway, there's video of all of us moving around in groups to different areas of the Hilton complex. And then they put us in trucks and moved a bunch of us to another camp eventually. But on January 27th of 73, they called us all into a big courtyard. And they'd already signed the peace agreement. We didn't know it, but they had already signed it. And they said the agreement signed. Part of the agreement said they had to notify us and had to read it to us. So they read the agreement to us, basically said, In 2 weeks from today, the first group of POWs would be released. And every 2 weeks after that, the next group would be released. So we knew every other week, a gang of us were going home. And that's the first we found out was on January 27th.
Wow.
That was quite a day.
Does that create mind games in your mind, though? You talked about release based on capture order, the order of capture, as one of the, somebody who was captured 9 months ago. Do you think, well, what happens if something goes wrong in the intervening period and they release the first batch and the second batch, but then they fall out and I get kept back? Does that enter your mind?
That actually happened, Steve. That actually happened. I think it was the third or the fourth group was supposed to be released one day, and no C-141 or C-130 showed up that day. Plus, the guards started treating us different. And we're going, oh my God, this whole thing has fallen through. That's what we were all thought, really. And then about 2 days later, the 141 came in and the 130 came in, and the guys that were supposed to go home 3 days prior to that, they went home. And so we couldn't wait to figure out. I found out what happened. I'll tell you later. But I didn't find out until I was at the White House from Dr. Kissinger. He was the one that told me what happened. And that's a great story. But anyway, so finally it came up and they moved us into another camp called the Zoo. And we were some of the last guys to get released because they had to move guys. There were a group of guys, about 200 POWs, in a camp near the Chinese border called Cao Bang. And prior to all of us new guys getting shot down, the POWs that had been there for years that were in the best physical condition, they moved them up to Cao Bang to make room for all of us new guys. So they moved us out, moved those guys near the Chinese border back into the Hilton so they could come home in the order that they were shot down. And we still never knew the day that we were going to get released. And this is a story that will blow you away. The morning of the day we were going home, they came in and they gave us clothes, real clothes. I mean, a blue shirt, a jacket, pants and shoes, and a little bag to put stuff in. And we said, we go home today? And their answer was always, you go home soon. That was it. That's all we knew. So don't put clothes on. Okay, so we didn't put clothes on. We tell you when to put clothes on. Okay. Well, later that afternoon, these two American newsmen walked into our room and they were carrying packages of cigarettes. And one of them was a guy named Steve Bell. He used to work for ABC. He said, guys, here, take these cigarettes because this is the only way we got in here. We told them we had cigarettes to give you, and they said, okay, because we gave them cigarettes too. So just want to let you know that you guys are going to be out of here in a couple of hours. There's a big, beautiful C-141 waiting for you at Kialam Airport. Well, Steve Bell was one. The other guy was Walter Cronkite. Both those guys were right in our room pretending to handing out cigarettes to let us know that we're going to be out of there in a few hours. And I tell you, I'll never forget that feeling, Steve. It was just, because that's the first time we knew we were really going. And we were going home that day. And that was really cool. Then they left and the guard came in and said, put your clothes on. We did. And then they put us on a bus. The bus left the zoo on the road. It was about probably a 25-minute ride to Kialam Airport. And I don't think there was a 400 or 500 foot stretch along the way that there wasn't a huge bomb crater there.
Really?
They bombed Hanoi. Everything was leveled. And that's why they signed the peace agreement. And because they knew they couldn't take anymore. We got to Kialam Airport we got off the bus in formation. We marched up to the table. At the table, there was an admiral, a general, and a North Vietnamese officer we called the Rabbit. He was one of the biggest torture guys there was there, by the way. As our name was called, we marched up and saluted. Navy guys saluted the admiral, Air Force guys. Well, we saluted both of them and shook their hands. And they said our names to make sure it was us. Yes, sir. And they go, welcome home, son. And then to our right, each of us had an escort that would walk with us to the 141. And the guy that was talking, he said, man, you're not going to believe what's waiting for you back in the U.S. He said it's an actual hero's welcome you got coming, and you're gonna really enjoy it. Well, Steve, the whole time I was over there, I didn't allow myself to cry. I was afraid if I did, I'd lose it. So I just turned the switch off. I still don't know how I did it, but I did it. I walked up the back of that 141. I'm right at the bottom of it. I look up there, and here's some flight nurses. Some of the other guys that were there prior to me, they were all clapping. Huge American flag up there. And God Bless America playing. I'm getting choked up telling you the story right now. And man, I started crying like a baby. Tears just came out the whole time I'm walking up there. You know, I'm smiling like crazy, but the tears are just flowing out my eyes like crazy. And no feeling like it. It was even better than when we got airborne, we crossed the water, and the guy flying the airplane said, gentlemen, just to let you know, you're officially out of North Vietnam. You know, of course, there was a huge applause and screaming and all that, but I had a bigger emotion walking up, seeing that American flag. That's why every time I hear the national anthem or I hear God Bless America, it gets me, even today.
Pig, who did you meet then when you stepped off that Starlifter?
When I stepped off,
when you got back to US soil, who met you at the airplane?
We stopped at Clark Air Force Base for 3 days. We had to go through debriefing, medicals, dental treatment. They made uniforms for us, custom made uniforms for us right there. We spent 3 days at Clark. I don't think any of us slept for 3 days. We had too much adrenaline running. When we tried to sleep, we couldn't sleep on a bed. So I think I got maybe 3 hours of sleep the whole time I was there, but I had to sleep on the floor because we got used to sleeping on concrete. And it's an example of no matter what your situation is, things become normal and you adapt to them. It's just the way it is. Because it took me almost 3 months after I got home before I could sleep in a bed. Literally. And we're all pretty much the same. We had to sleep on the floor. And the guys that spent years over there, some of them, it took a year before they could sleep in a bed again. But we left Clark, stopped in Hawaii, went home. I went to Travis Air Force Base in Sacramento because it was the closest to where I lived in California. And when I stepped off, my wife and my little son were there. And my son was 6 months old when I left. He was well over a year and a half when I got back. And then all my squatter buddies were there. So I got to see them. And then, of course, my parents all flew in and got to see them after that.
What is that experience
Quite an experience.
Like? What is that like? How do you feel?
It was just, if you can say, overjoyed, probably equal to seeing the birth of a child. It was just, just so emotional, and you're so grateful and thankful you're still alive to be able to be there. That's probably the best way I can explain it.
I wanted to ask, Pig, just very briefly, I don't want to sort of make a big deal out of it, but listening to you talk about the music playing God Bless America, the flag, the sacrifice that you as a community and as individuals had been through to be able to step back on that Starlifter and go home. The idea of indoctrination, turning people, and the fact that there were people in the United States who didn't need turning. They had already turned. And I'm thinking about people like Jane Fonda, who had gone along, and you can be anti-war, but the things she did were just awful, despicable. How do you reconcile those things? Do you think, well, it's the land of the great and the free, and that she's free to do, and those other people are free to do those things? Do you harbor resentment for those things? How do you look at those things?
Well, we were actually victims of Jane Fonda one day over there. Her and this other guy, I forgot his name. They were visiting, and we got locked up and tied up while they were visiting because they didn't want us to say anything to them or be able to contact them in any way. There was resentment when we got home. For me, probably still is a little bit, but nothing like it was before. I think there are a lot of, especially military towns. You walk into restrooms of restaurants, and there are Jane Fonda urinals, and you've probably seen those. But that's all the true harboring resentment, for the most part, pretty much let go. Not for the guards that tied us up and hurt us. It's still there. In fact, your friend Paco visited Hanoi Hilton not too long ago, by the way, and he took some pictures. The Hilton, they turned it into kind of a hotel, not a real hotel, made it look nice and all that kind of stuff. Paco took pictures of all this place, and he texted them to me right from there, and he goes, "Hey, Pig, you really need to come over here and visit this place. They've done so much with it. You'd really like it." I said, "Paco, you send me another picture of that, I'll kill you." And I said a few other things too, but you know how Paco is. And I get that question a lot. Say, "Hey, do you ever want to go back and visit?" I said, I've been asked to go on trips to visit. And I just say politely no. Some of the people, if I know them well enough, I said, "Yeah, I'll go visit. You give me an F-18 Super Hornet with 2 nukes, and I'll go visit. That's the only way I'm going back." And that's pretty much how I feel about it.
Yeah. So Sly told me your flight helmet and your ID is in a museum in Hanoi. Is that correct?
It is. It is. I'll send you those. I thought I'd sent you those pictures, but I'll send them to you.
That's okay. You sent me the tape, so the tape was enough of a sort of a gesture. So yeah, okay. Yeah, I can put those up on the screen. Okay, can we talk then a little bit about what happens next? We talked about, or I've introduced your book, and maybe what you can do is talk us through how the book came about and what your experiences were up until that point. One of the things that I'm always curious about is the return to normality, whether or not there is such a thing as a return to normality. And you are back at Travis, you're meeting your son for the first time. Well, he's pretty much for the first time, and your wife and your parents. What happens to that elation? What replaces the elation? And what's your journey then from there?
Well, I'll tell you that the coolest part about I was attached to Oakland Naval Hospital. A bunch of us Navy guys that were in California, that's where we were. And we went through more debriefing and more physicals and things like that. I was back about 9 or 10 days, and my commanding officer was at Fallon Naval Air Station with the Air Wing, doing some workups, and he said, "Hey, Pig, you want to come fly an A-7?" And I said, "Are you serious, Skipper?" And he said, "Yep, you want to come?" And I went, "Can I come today?" And he said, "No, but I'll send a T-28 for you tomorrow with all your flight gear and everything, and I'll bring you over here. We'll go flying." And they did. They sent a T-28. I jumped in it. I went to Fallon. Gave me a flight suit, flight boots, G-suit, a new helmet and everything. I jumped in one A-7. The skipper jumped in another one. We did a section takeoff, went out, dropped some practice bombs. And I beat him, by the way. And we did some dogfighting and came back, and the admiral was there, and I signed the papers to augment into the regular Navy. And I was the first airman to fly tactical jets of all the POWs that came back. And the reason I was is the Air Force guys in particular had to go through this formal training in San Antonio to get current again. And most of the Navy guys had to go through some training, but my skipper had enough cojones and was such an incredible leader that the thing he wanted most was to get me back flying. And he hung his career out online to do that. That guy was a guy I named one of my sons after. His name was Lou Chatham. And he's a retired admiral now. He was also that solo pilot that signed those pictures for me, was the guy that made me want to go in the Navy. Isn't that something?
Incredible. Absolutely incredible
story.
Is he local to you now? Do you hang out?
No, he's in Tucson, retired Rear Admiral.
Okay. What a story.
Great guy.
Wow.
Oh, that's a great story. And when I got my F4 orders, I told you I got any orders I wanted, so I went down to Miramar to fly F4s. And being an LSO, I was about a week away from getting fully qualified to wave everything in the air wing day and night. And I got down there. I was going to instructor in the RAG to get checked out. Well, there was an ops officer down there that didn't want me there because I took the orders that his buddy was supposed to get. So he made things a little difficult for me. I couldn't get qualified as an LSO and all that. And I figured out, okay, because I was an attack pilot, and they were fighter pilots at the time. Big difference back then, but it didn't matter. My skipper, Lou, was there. He was going to be the air wing commander on the Midway. So he was there getting checked out in the F4 as well. So he had me over to his house for dinner. And I said, Skipper, this really sucks here because of the way things are going. Think there's any chance I can go back to Lemoore and fly A-7s again? He said, Mike, I told you not to come down here. I said, I know, you did. He said, what squadron do you want to go to? And I told him. The F4 skipper that was with us on the Midway was now the head detailer at the Bureau in Washington, D.C. My skipper, Lou, called John Disher and told him I want to go back to Lemoore. The next day, I walk into my squadron at Miramar, and the skipper of my squadron comes into my office waving these papers. Pig, what in the hell are these? They were my orders back to Lemoore. He said, what's this all about? And I told him. The guy was a jerk, man. He was jerking me around and not letting me instruct air to air, and I can't wave RPs. And he said, well, I'll take care of that. Any chance I can change your mind? I went, no, sir, going back. So I went back, and I was an instructor in the RAG back in Lemoore with some great guys that ended up being on the Blue Angels. 3 of them were the leaders. We were all instructors together, and Lemoore, great guys. And then I had another full squadron tour with these guys with the green tails you see afterwards. And, then I tried to get on the Blue Angels, and that didn't work. And I decided, well, if I didn't, I made the finalists. There were 3 of us. And they were picking 2 out of the 3, and I didn't make it. So I'd already decided if I didn't make it, I was going to get out. And I did, went to Continental Airlines. And the good news of that, my wife was a Continental flight attendant, and so it turned out well.
At what point do you meet Kissinger then?
Oh, right after we got back, President Nixon invited all the POWs to the White House for an extravagant 3-day party. And they had a real nice dinner on the East Lawn set up. And we were standing in line waiting to go through to get our plate. Right behind me was Dr. Kissinger. And I didn't know that. One of my buddies is in front of me and he goes, "Big, look." So I turned around. I went, "Dr. Kissinger, I'd like to introduce myself." And I just wanted to say thank you for all the work you did on the peace accords over there. And I said, "Can I ask you one question though?" He said, "Absolutely." I said, "Back when it looked like they weren't going to release us out of there, how did that end up happening? What happened?" He said, "Well, Mike, that was easy. The president told me to tell their negotiators at the peace table that you don't let those guys go tomorrow, I'm going to bomb you into oblivion." That's how it went. I figured it had to be the case, but I heard that straight from Dr. Kissinger.
Tell us, Mike, about your psychological journey, then your emotional journey after the Hanoi Hilton. Then your book is called Hope and Courage, and so I'm going to let you talk about that, and you can introduce that into the conversation wherever you want, whenever you want. And I want you to talk about it. I want the message out. I want people to know what you're doing and to buy the book and to read the story and share it and to make sure people get the help that you can offer them. What was your journey? I read an interview online where you had talked about alcohol and the pressures of coming back. You don't have to share anything you don't want to, but what was your personal journey then through? I'm assuming you had post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm assuming that, but what happened to you?
I'm really glad you asked, Steve. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about it. Throughout the POW experience, I saw the importance of never losing hope. And what I equated to that, I told you earlier, you can live about a month without food, about a week without water. You can't live one day without hope, because I almost gave up and I just about lost hope. And it wasn't until Kevin yelled at me across the hall in that room was when my brain started working normally again. And then I realized that hope will give you if you maintain hope, it will give you the courage to never give up. The Navy SEALs, they're in another world. They never give up anyway. But normal people, once you envision so much pain and trauma, and that you just about lose it, and you just about give up. But I found the key was not losing hope. Later on in my life was I was holding out hope for other areas. Just like when I was growing up, I had to overcome a lot of obstacles just to get out of college and get to be in the Navy. And I never lost hope, because I had a burning desire to achieve that goal. I wasn't going to give up on anything to achieve that goal of flying a Navy jet. So every obstacle I overcame. And I saw how hope is the key to the whole situation. Later, my father died, my mother died. I had PTSD. All of us pretty much had to a certain extent, not as bad as the guys that spent years over there. But I started drinking way too much. Actually, I started doing it in the Navy when I lost my friends. But my wife, God love her, she pretty much saved me. We were in California taking my younger son, who was in the Navy, back to his Navy base. And she goes, "Mike, I want to show you, this place just north of LA." Cool. So she drove up there, went to the back, threw the suitcase out, and said, "You got a room reserved in there. If you don't stay for a month, you're never going to see me or your daughter ever again." And I went, "Oh, wow." And well, I wasted a few days thinking that I'm too good for this place. I don't belong here. And fortunately, I had an ex-Marine counselor that had about all the bunk he wanted to hear out of my mouth. He actually pushed me up against the wall in a group of people and said, "Mike, you're 51 years old. Your way of doing things got you in a damn treatment center. Why don't you just shut up and let us tell you about a better way of living? And oh, by the way, do you remember how you felt when your dad put a gun in his mouth and killed himself? Do you want your kids to feel the same way when you do the same thing?" Steve, when he said that, I was all ears after that. I went, damn, he's right. I've got a problem and I got to fix it. So that was over 28 years ago, and hadn't had a drink since. And fortunately, I've been able to help a lot of people. In the airlines, we have what's called a HIMSS program. It's for guys and gals with addiction problems. They get treatment. The companies pay for it. All the airlines have this program, by the way. And once it takes them several months, sometimes a year, to come back to work because there's a lot of boxes that have to be checked. And fortunately, I was in charge of all these guys in Houston for Southwest, so I got to help a bunch of guys, and I attended an aftercare that we were required to for 2 years, and it was run by this doctor here in Houston. And he was having surgery one morning. He called me the night before. He said, Mike, in case I don't make it through this surgery, I want you to promise to keep this group going every Saturday morning. And I said, Dr. Bob, you're going to be okay, but you bet I'll promise. Well, he died. Oh. And I've kept that group going every Saturday morning and hopefully help save some lives. And I still do it on Saturdays. And the big reason I wrote the book, because I was doing a bunch of my guys, friends told me to write a book, and I was doing a presentation in Aberdeen proving grounds for the Army and the National Security Agency. And there were 4 of us. They wanted one member from each branch of the armed forces. And my friend, Frank, was the Marine. We had a Air Force guy who was a space shuttle commander. The Army representative was a guy named Rocky Blyer. You might have heard from him, running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mm-hmm. And then I went on last, and I did what I talked about, and all about hope and all about giving you the courage and never giving up no matter what, of all the lessons learned. And then after it was over, we talked to people and signed some papers. And this enlisted Army guy in uniform came up and said, Captain Penn, do you mind if I talk to you for a moment? I said, sure, no problem. He said, I just want you to know that this morning I made the decision to kill myself tonight. And after I heard what you said about hope, I now know that if I keep hope, it will give me the courage to never give up on myself. I said, that's right, son. And he said, Captain Penn, I don't know how I could ever thank you for what you've given me today. And I said, son, you just did. And when that happened, Steve, from that minute on, I said, I got to write a book about this. So I did.
Fantastic.
And that's exactly why I wrote the book. I had to, if that book will share one more life, it's worth it. And that's it.
Wow, it's phenomenal. And yeah, and what more can you do? Mm-hmm. You just went on Marcus Luttrel's podcast. That's
I did.
it's a step up from mine. How did that go?
We had a great time. He asked me a lot of similar questions. We just chatted just like we are now, and his wife Melanie was there with him. And at the end, she asked me that question: why did you write the book? Mm. And I told her. And
did you talked about Navy SEALs never giving up? He's obviously a Navy SEAL. I mean, presumably everybody will know who that person is, or know that name. Did you find commonality with him then? I mean, were there things that you were saying that were resonating with him in particular, or that surprised him? Do you think he took anything away from
it? Going through what Marcus went through, I think he knew all that, what I was talking about. In fact, the very night I met him years ago, we were at a Monday night football game here in Houston. It was during November salute to service for the NFL. And Marcus and I were invited to sit in the owner's box for this Monday night football game. Well, actually, they invited me to lead the team out of the tunnel. And so I was going to do that. And then they saw, because my back was kind of injured and my knees was bad, they're looking at me like, let's see, you're 75. You're not going to lead that team out of the tunnel. They're going to run over your butt. So they said, tell you what, we're going to let you come out of the tunnel prior to the team, and we're going to introduce you and tell everybody your background, and that's the way we'll do it. So that's what happened. But anyway, after that, I went up to the owner's box, and Marcus was there, and I met him and met the other people, and I got to sit with Marcus for the whole game, and all we did was talk about Navy and our experiences and stuff, and it was just like it's like we were darn good friends after that. And back before the I did the podcast quite a bit before he called me. He knew I was writing a book, and he called me one day and just said, "Hey, I just want to know how your book's going." And I said, "Well, it's just about done, Marcus." And he said, "Tell you what, whenever you get it done, I'll have you on the podcast, and we're going to sell some damn books." That's exactly what he said. And we had a ball on the podcast. I think it airs the 12th. Is when they're going to air it.
I'm really hoping that it works for you. It should do. I mean, he's got a huge audience, and I think probably the message you're sharing resonates in particular with his audience. His community is a community that struggled with, you know, how do you go out and ask for help? You know, you can't be expected to do everything on your own. You know, what you think you know maybe not is not how things are. All those things. So I hope that's very successful.
It was, and he'd be the first one to tell you that's what has to happen. You know, it just has to happen. And what I hope is, you know, we lose 22, 23 military guys a day from suicide. And in my heart, if I can reach one of them or all of them to let them know, never lose hope. And if you don't, it'll give you the courage to never give up. And it's amazing how reading one thing or hearing one thing may make a difference in your life. And that's why I wrote it.
So the book is available on Amazon. I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. How can people come and see you talk? Have you got a list of tour dates that you're doing? How does that work? Can people come and actually see you talk live and talk to you?
It will be on my website, hopeandcourage.us.
Okay,
is the website, and all that stuff will be on the website. It has a link to the book on Amazon, and I can see videos of me talking about certain subjects, and and I'll be uploading more videos as we go.
okay.
And usually speaking engagements like that are for businesses. So, you know, you just can't attend, but if I'm lucky, I'll might be able to make it on Fox News one of these days. People can see that.
Amazing.
A lot of people going to see your podcast, Steve. It's quite popular, and it's awesome. You do a great job.
Thank you, Big. Let me finish with one question, if I may. One more question. You earlier in the conversation had talked about how you. I said you dodged death 3 or 4 times. You said it was more like 7 or 8, and then you listed it. And it was more like 7 or 8. And you said obviously you're supposed to be here. I just wondered how, at this point in your life, then how you view that experience, 1972, 1973, your captivity, the shootdown captivity, and then going through a battle with alcohol, dealing with PTSD. Are you? It's a very personal question. Are you religious? Are you a fatalist? What is your philosophical view on the experience you had and the fact that you came out of the other side successfully?
I am religious. As a matter of fact, when I grabbed that face curtain to eject out of the jet, I said, "God help me." That's what I said. And I look at the reason I'm going, looking back, I just said, all these ways I should have died within about a 10-minute period, and I didn't. So somebody up there had other plans for me. And somebody told me, my former pastor of my church, who's gone to Colorado, and I miss him like crazy. We used to play golf together a lot. He said, we were talking about hope. And he goes, Mike, hope is God's way of telling you, I'm not done yet. And boy, when he said that, I went, that's why I'm here. I'm here to help all these guys with alcohol and drug problems. And if I can just save one, and I think I've helped to save more than one, and I'm going to keep doing it. And I really think that's why I'm here, Steve, is I keep doing this on Saturday, and it's just part of me, and it's part of what I feel like, probably why I'm here.
Well, if the audience at home listening to this, share it, get it out, make sure that there's an even better likelihood that people will be able to hear Mike's words, Pig's words, and get the help that they need. Pig, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really a privilege. Such a candid retelling of your experience, and warts and all, very grateful to you for doing that. And I'd like to get back with you at some point, maybe talk about flying A-7Es and maybe go through that tape and get you to narrate over it. But that's a conversation for another day. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure, Steve. Anytime.